people in their native.
Hey. Oh, we've got a new guest. Lovely.
Look at
Hello there.
And you survived the war.
Yes.
So many stories.
For our Spotify listeners, I'd just like to say that we've got a cat joining us on this cozy sofa here. Okay, but that's a real cat. Now she came,
a real
she's
cat.
gone. Yeah. So.
And her owner was killed in the war. And that's how she's come to be with her new family.
Yeah.
Like so many.
Like so many.
Like too many.
Yes. Welcome to Storytelling Ukraine, the podcast of amazing stories. Make sure to listen till the end, because the best stories are told when the guests are about to leave, right? And I'm very happy that our guest today is Roy Allison. Hello, Roy.
Hello.
So this podcast is about storytelling, and we are about to share with everyone the stories you have of Ukraine. But before that, could you please give us a little bit of a background? So how did it happen that you actually have Ukraine stories to share?
Very interesting question.
Okay.
I have to blame my Russian friends.
All right.
They literally would come up to me and say, "You need to go to Russia." And then they would pause. "No, you need to go to Ukraine."
Okay.
And I said, this is kind of like a New Yorker telling me I need to go to Mexico. It's not normal. And after about 8 friends, we had a very large group in San Antonio, Texas. After about 8 Russian friends, it was like, okay, what's going on over there in Ukraine that I need to go see?
Okay.
And I came over here the first time about 2009, 2010, and fell in love with the culture, the people. It's very much like what I grew up with. I grew up as an Anglo on the border of Mexico, a white Mexican. And so the cultures are similar. Catholicism there versus Orthodoxy here.
Right.
And family.
Family values.
Very much, very much.
I see. Okay, so you came to Ukraine for the first time quite a long time ago, and then did you keep visiting Ukraine, or did you move here, or what happened after your first visits?
I am now moving here, but I visited many times, about 4 years total.
Excellent.
I've lived in Chernomorsk, outside of Odessa, and really loved it there, but there's more opportunity here to help with the war than vacationing. Okay. So I've moved up here to Obolon area.
Excellent. So when you were still visiting Ukraine and not moving here, not living here, so I imagine that you would stay for some time in Ukraine, then you would come back home and you would like meet with your buddies and mates over beer or something.
Yeah.
And they would ask you like, so tell us, what's Ukraine like? So what would be your stories? Like something that you would share with your friends, just to give them a good feeling of what Ukraine is.
How nice the Ukrainian people are.
Okay.
I have a disability that most people don't notice, but I sometimes walk with a cane. And here, it's common for a young man to open a door for me. In the United States, it's common for a young man to try to push his way through a door that I've opened for me.
I see.
And it's just a very different kindness level.
I see. And you've mentioned this example with the door, but I'm sure that there's sort of a general impression of Ukrainians being kind is based on a number of experiences. It's not only one guy opening the door for you, right?
Correct.
Okay. So do you recall anything else that basically supports this claim? Because I'm sure there are some people who would disagree and would say, oh no, those Ukrainians, they're so cruel and mean and
they got that stiff upper lip and
right, yeah.
That coldness about people. When you meet people on the street, you're right, there is that aloofness, that coldness, that people don't want to interact. But once you meet somebody in a place where there's a reason to interact, they open up. And so for an American, it's different. It's kind of like the person's half from the South, half from Texas, friendly, and half from up north, cold, like maybe Chicago. And we don't, in America, function that way. We're either from Texas or from Chicago. But Ukrainians really, it's like there's two persons in there on the street. They're not wanting to interact very much, very much. And then in person, it's like you said earlier, let's go have a beer and talk with mates.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
let's go.
Yeah.
Quite a bit different than the way we would socialize in America.
I see.
And part of that, I think, is also because here you don't have to drive, and in America we drive. And that causes problems when you go somewhere to get a couple drinks,
Exactly. Yeah.
especially in
Just a
America.
couple.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I see. Have you noticed any differences when it comes to different regions of Ukraine? Like both, you know, the way you saw the surrounding, you know, the architecture and the feeling about the place, and also the people. Because, you know, in Western media, there is sometimes this narrative that originates from Russia, that, you know, you have Western Ukraine and Eastern Ukraine, and that those are different. You're laughing. Okay, I guess I know your answer, but please go ahead.
Well, you can guess most of it. Having lived in the Odessa area, many of the people I'm friends with, actually their families originated, quote, from Russia, which is interesting because a lot of times they were Ukrainians who'd been moved to Russia and then were moved back. You know, there's a bunch of that. And
My
some
grandma's
were,
story.
oh, see? And then there are some that actually were genuinely Russian that had been moved here 50 years ago, 100 years ago. And then the war started the first time, 2014. And before that point in time, everybody was very comfortable speaking Russian. After that point in time, I noticed a solid shift towards people wanting to speak Ukrainian in the Odessa region.
Which really is unthinkable if
Yes.
you like visited Odessa in the 1990s, for example.
Oh, exactly. Or if you bought into the Russian story, the Russian narrative that they're all Russians there.
Right,
They want us to come in and liberate them.
right.
And then they did come in and try to liberate, and there were a bunch of people killed. And a friend of mine, and I won't mention her name because, you know, she is nervous about her name being out there, but she was upstairs in her apartment when the shooting started during the riots in Odessa. And it really shook her up bad. And for me, I've been in the Army, I'm an old Texan, I'm like, okay, there were 2 shots and the riot went away from you. It wouldn't faze me that much. Of course, then again, in America, there's a lot more shootings than there are here. But she got very shook up. And some of my other friends also got very shook up. And almost immediately, there was a solid turn away from what they would previously identified themselves as Russian Ukrainians. Now they're just Ukrainian. There is no, you know, I speak Russian or Ukrainian or this, or it's just, I'm Ukrainian. And that part of the narrative, Russian intelligence totally missed when they started the second avenue of war. They totally missed how strongly everybody, well, everybody, 95, 98% of the population strongly identifies as Ukrainian, even in the Lugansk region. And they just totally thought, you know, we're going back to the Russian Empire, and when we say that you're going to become Russian and quit speaking Ukrainian, that means it's settled.
Yeah. Oh, they were wrong.
They were wrong.
They were really wrong, yeah. So Ukrainian identity is basically being forged right now, yes, in the fires of this war. But at the same time, Ukraine has always been different, and people who lived in Ukraine have always been different. Obviously from the Russians and maybe, you know, from some other nations that we shared the prison with in the Soviet Union. But maybe you noticed some really outstanding differences between Ukrainians and the Westerners. Because we like thinking of ourselves as, you know, Europeans. We say that we're coming back to the Ukrainian home. But do you see these differences? And if you do, what kind of differences do you see?
Well, I see a lot of differences. And I see that with Maidan, I flew back for Maidan to visit. And I asked the question then that I would ask somebody now that's Ukrainian. are you really wanting to be Western, or are you wanting to be free from Russia? And the answer is always, oh, I want to be free from Russia.
Okay.
Being Western's okay, but the identity of the Ukrainian here is about being away from Moscow,
Right.
the cruel taskmaster.
Yes, exactly. So we built our identity on defying Russia and trying to separate from Russia. It's like in the abusive relationship, I would say. Yeah.
Yes.
So we're trying like to emancipate ourselves.
Yes,
Okay. So it's not that much about our Western identity. It's about us not accepting the identity that they want to impose upon us. Right.
exactly.
Okay. Good. We are getting like into some serious philosophical stuff. Do you have some funny Ukraine story?
Oh, actually, I have a funny story for me. I was in Poland a month ago. I had to do a visa run. I'm switching over from my business, which is drones for Ukraine. And I see this guy in the corner, and I'm going, you look South American. And I said hello to him in Spanish, and no response. And then because I was thinking in Spanish, this lady and her kid walked between me, and I said something else to her in Spanish, just reflex.
Carrying on, yes, with this.
Yeah, that got his attention. Colombian Special Forces, he had come there to join with the battalion of Spanish speakers. He had some euros. He spoke no English, no Polish, of course, and no Ukrainian. And I just happened to be there. And I'm bilingual, so I interpreted, helped him get money changed into hryvnia, helped him get money changed into zloty so he could pay for his bus ticket. Then we met a lady outside and was able, with my surzik, to converse with her enough that she would be able to drop him off in the little village he needed to actually go to, not in Lviv where his bus was going to. And I'm just sitting there going, how crazy is it that you've gone around the world to help fight for freedom, and you don't speak the language, you don't have any money, you don't have any tickets, you just have a destination.
Right.
I was really impressed, and I hope someday to reach back out to him and find him again. Mm-hmm. Not the easiest thing. I should have written his name down when I saw his passport, but I wasn't thinking about that at the time.
Yes.
But it was really not at all what I expected to run into.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yes, but I guess there was a good reason why you were there. You know,
I think
if you
so.
think about it, it's no coincidence. It seems to me.
I agree.
You know, I
I
think
agree.
that there must be some force of bringing people together.
There has to be.
There has to be. There really has to be. So yeah, that's an amazing story. And when you speak to expats here in Ukraine, they are no ordinary people because they stayed. So one thing is that they are brave and courageous. But what else can you say about that? What kind of conversations do you have? Because expats, it's like a very interesting type of
Yes, it is.
human community, right?
Yes, it is.
So what does it feel like to live in an expat community in Ukraine now?
Now, I get out a lot from the expat community also,
Of course,
because I
yeah.
like the locals.
Yes.
But the expat community, one thread that runs through it in its entirety is, like you said, so many of them, I was actually helping over the internet when it first started again, but so many of them staying here were being shot at. So many of us lost friends in the opening engagements. So living there in Obolon, the front line was a couple hundred meters from where I live. And I had friends that had the windows shot out. And in fact, my lawyer just had his apartment blown up about 10 days ago. And so we're helping him, and hopefully he moves to Obolon, to a better apartment and everything. We're working with him on that.
Yeah. So I guess right now there is no really such a distinct expat community because people are intermingling and...
True, but there are lots of cohesive elements, things that we're all gathering around. So there's one group I've got a lot of friends in. They like to go out on Wednesday night for a beer, once, twice a month at least, and just chill out together, the guys, for a beer. And then several other groups I'm involved in. One is a Spanish-speaking group, amazingly. Another one is a Ukrainian lessons group, and it's mostly us expats, but then a few Ukrainians helping us, which, thank you, because it's not the easiest language.
No.
And then, of course, English groups. And there are a lot of us as expats giving back into the community, helping people learn English.
So you basically live inside the community, you're part of the community now in Ukraine. Was it difficult to get used to some of the things? Because, living in Texas and now living in Kiev and Obolon, these must be two very different experiences.
Very different.
So was it difficult to get used to something, or is there anything that you really miss about home that you don't find here?
I miss Mexican food.
Okay.
I must be honest.
I saw it coming.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess that would really be about it. I've lived internationally and worked internationally and traveled a lot for work, civilian and military. So a lot of those problems were already taken care of for me years ago. But there are a lot of differences. So here, I don't drive a car. I use metro, public transportation. And one problem in America we get as Americans is we misunderstand public transportation. We are very spread out as a country. It's difficult to do public transportation when your population is that spread out. But here, it's easy. And so I jump on the metro. It took a little time for me to get used to, but having already studied Russian a little bit, the Cyrillic was very easy for me. And I'm learning the Ukrainian so that I'm not answering people in Russian, because I don't like doing that. I don't want to, for one, I know some friends are offended because they've told me so. And then for two, I also want to learn the Ukrainian because then I'm speaking to people in their native. Hey.
Oh, we've got a new guest. Lovely.
Look at you.
Hello there.
And you survived the war.
Yes.
So many stories.
For our Spotify listeners, I'd just like to say that we've got a cat joining us on this cozy sofa here. Okay, but that's a real cat. Now she came,
real
she's
cat.
gone. Yeah. So.
And her owner was killed in the war. And that's how she's come to be with her new family.
Yeah.
Like so many.
Like so many.
Like too many.
Yes. You've lived, as you said, and visited many countries around the world. Mm-hmm. And how does Ukraine compare to some of those countries? Mm-hmm. And I'm not asking about praising Ukraine, saying, oh, Ukraine is better in this, better in that. Mm-hmm. But I'm hoping that there will be a lot of people from other countries listening to this podcast. Mm. And I guess they want to get some sort of a degree of comparison. And maybe they've visited some other countries and see how you compare, Ukraine with some of those countries that they know. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Ukraine has a very strong family connection, extended family and friends. And that fits in with a lot of the cultures I've been in, whether it's the Asian cultures or the Hispanic cultures, Mexico, South America. And so that fits in very well. There's also a very strong love of country, love of people, and that fits in very well. And there's a strong overall, I don't want to say God, but there's a theology basis. There's a common ground for everybody that finds itself loosely rooted in the Orthodox Church. And so whether you go to Korea or you go to Mexico, there's just a lot of similarity in those cultures. The people have a lot in common.
Yeah, I remember I was, years ago, I was dancing in a folk dance group, ensemble, whatever, and I remember we went to this festival in Poland. And that was like a folklore festival, and there were groups and bands and people from all over the world. And the guys that we really had the best time with were from Peru.
Oh, wow.
We didn't speak a word of Spanish. They obviously didn't speak a word of Ukrainian, but we had the most fun, and we had this sort of, like almost connection without the
Yes.
words. So, yes, that's
I've just made a good dear friend from Lima, Peru.
okay.
She's here studying to be a doctor.
Excellent,
And yeah,
excellent.
it's very nice.
Yeah, so Ukraine is welcoming to expats and hospitable and again, okay. I'm saying good things about Ukraine. Okay, let's speak
only
about
bad
something
things,
bad.
only bad
Let's
things.
speak
Okay.
about something bad. So, what was the thing that took you maybe the longest to get used to in Ukraine? What is something that really?
The grandmothers wanting the bus to be 45 degrees
Okay.
in August. So 110, 115 for my American friends. Whoa, they want it hot. And I'm like, okay, it's hot enough. Can we open some windows?
Yeah, this is the thing. They are really scared that this gust
Cross.
of wind. Yes, yeah, exactly.
But I experienced it. So went to Lviv, and we went from Lviv. I was doing another visa run. We went to Rome and back. But I got to watch as the weather changed and we went west, everybody getting sicker.
Okay.
And it wasn't just our bus group, because every hotel we stayed at as we went west, you could see the weather traveling with us and everybody getting sick. And I'm going, okay, I got taught that you can't get sick from the weather, but I'm watching this. Wow. Now I know where we call them old wives' tales,
Right.
come from.
Yeah.
This is real. I don't know what's doing it. I got so sick. I got really sick. And I was like, okay, allergies, something, but it was done by the weather.
Okay. So yeah, those grandmas, they basically do have a point,
Yes,
just to a certain extent, maybe.
maybe.
Okay, but I hate it too.
I
really
hate it too.
Yeah, yeah. So that was one bad thing. Okay, let's find something else, because people may think we're not really objective here and like praising and saying how great things are. What is something else that you'd rather change here in Ukraine?
Traffic. Traffic's bad. But I also choose not to drive here, so it's not that bad for me. Traffic needs to improve. There's still some movement away from the, quote, corruption era. But I think a lot of Americans especially don't realize that a lot of that corruption came out of the Russian way of doing things. And wasn't necessarily because we were in Ukraine. But there's still some movement needs to go. And definitely finishing the war.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the worst thing right now. People, and this is an irony for me, it's safer for me here than it would be to be in London.
Yeah.
It's safer. But I constantly meet people who are just, aren't you scared? And so I see the imprint upon the people, the population, that the war is causing. And it's causing a trauma that will take centuries to recover from.
Yes. And it's not the first war we have with
No.
Russia, so it's...
And it probably won't be the last. I hate to say that. But Moscow has never been nice.
No. No, it hasn't. So what is a story that really stands out and that we can't really miss in this podcast? Something that you haven't shared, but something that
Whoa.
is like sort of a defining thing. I mean, we can turn off the cameras and wait a little if you need more time, but maybe there's something that stands out in this whole experience, because you keep referring to this experience that you're having now when Ukraine is at war, and but maybe there's something else back from the times that you were visiting Ukraine and still learning about it and experiencing it, and maybe there was something that sort of was like an eye-opener for...
I've made such deep friendships that I really just wasn't expecting to make. You meet somebody and you know of them, about them, so it's not a casual, you met somebody, over dinner and they're at the next table or something. And then a few months later, you need help with something. And they're there. So I've had to move. People just show up and help. That in America, I wouldn't consider to know them well enough to be that close of a friend. But here in Ukraine, the culture is such that the people are helping. And I've often wondered if that's an overlay of the culture itself, that it's just cultural, or if it's become from the communist era when everybody was taught to be that way also. But I think it's probably a little mix of the two. I don't know, because I'm not Ukrainian and definitely not communist. So
That's for sure.
definitely not.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So you know Ukraine well enough to answer this next question. So what is one thing that the whole world gets wrong about Ukraine?
The level of corruption. They totally miss it. Every country has corruption. The United States, 15 years ago, we were bribing people in the Middle East with suitcases of money, flying them in all the time. Hundreds of millions of dollars. If there's corruption here, it's going to be measured in hryvnia,
Right.
about 1/40th the amount that a dollar would be. And so the level of corruption just cannot economically be that high. And having grown up around corruption and seen corruption in other parts of the world, I've seen too many traffic stops here back when it was corrupt, and I'm going, that's not a bribe. And my expat friend would say, oh no, that has to be a bribe. He stopped him. See, he's paying him. Okay, nobody bribing somebody, asking for a bribe, is going to spend 20 minutes with a stopped vehicle.
Right.
It's not financially viable.
No.
So what he's doing is he's filling out the ticket, the guy's paying for the ticket there, and maybe he's going to skim some of that money. I don't know. But he's not working on bribes right now.
Right. Yes.
Maybe at some other point in his career, but I've seen bribery, and bribery usually takes less than about 40 seconds.
You know, otherwise you get caught. So, yes,
Yeah.
no wonder. Right. Now, what about Ukrainians? What is one thing that the Ukrainians get wrong about themselves?
Oh, about themselves.
About themselves, yeah. Us
Okay.
about us, Ukrainians about Ukrainians.
That the rest of the world is their best friend.
It's amazing, but our previous guest just said the same.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's true.
Yeah, it's you know, the truth is always sad in a way.
It's always in the middle.
Yeah. So,
But Ukrainians do believe in the great Europe, the great America. And what Ukraine needs is Ukraine.
remember this, please. What we need is Ukraine.
Yes.
Excellent. Wonderful. We couldn't, you know, find a better ending for this interview, which is like episode 1 with you. I'm sure that we'll
Thank you.
meet and we'll have another chance to talk because I really enjoyed it. And one last question. If you were to write a book about Ukraine, what would be the title?
I think I would title it The Battle for Putingrad
Okay.
and do a play off of Stalingrad.
Okay.
The losses are comparable. Russia's really bleeding badly. And it's sad because they don't see the correlation themselves.
No. It is sad, but, you know, someone has to teach them a lesson.
And it's sad that it had to be Ukraine, but I'm glad it was Ukraine because you guys are doing it.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Roy. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
You're
Thank you, guys. And yes, I have something to tell at the end. I'm still learning to do a podcast, and they say in all those tutorials that you're supposed to sort of make up this similar ending so that it
Okay.
really ends well. So I had it written down here. Sorry, I'll be just beeping. So thank you for sharing your time with us, and please hit the subscribe and follow button and all the buttons you can see because we really need your support. And you can support us on Patreon, and You can support us and buy me a coffee. And also, in the description to this podcast, you will find other ways of how you can help us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. And finally, let's make this a world of stories and not of headlines. Okay, thank you. Thank you again. Robert, lovely.